Thank you very much, sir, for those kind words of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Lester Brown has indicated that we really are up against it environmentally, and that means economically and socially and all kinds of other ways. He's done a marvellous job of laying it all out for us. And he's come up with a good number of solutions to our problems, notably as regards water and land and soil and crops and so on. And it should give us a lot of hope, and it does. But here comes the big but. Put it this way: I've been in the environmental game for 50 years, and I would say that during that time, the amount of money going into environmental safeguards has increased. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's increased 5 times. That might be too low, might be too high, but for the sake of argument, the amount of money going to environment has increased 5 times. And the amount of citizen interest and support has also increased 5 times. And the amount of political backup has increased for 5 times, let's just say. And despite all those marvellous increases in support for the environmental cause, damn it, here we are, well into the next century, and on the whole, the environmental cause is going down, in some respects, faster than ever. All the additional support and interest and so on, and yet the things are steadily getting worse. If you doubt that, remember what we learned from climate change and global warming. And I would even go so far as to say, ladies and gentlemen, that if in the foreseeable future all those supports, political interests, scientific research and so on, if all those supports were to be doubled, well, that's not going to happen, but just suppose that it will happen. I don't think that will be sufficient to save the day. And you might say, well, there it goes, doom and gloom and unlimited. By the end of this lecture, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I will have partly persuaded at least a good number of you that we still have time, we still have glorious time to turn around a very difficult situation into more of a promising situation. It can be done. I've not the slightest doubt at all, and I say that as a card-carrying scientist. It can be done. So let's not jump ship and keep saying, "Oh, the day is lost," because it's not lost at all. There's a great deal that we can do. I'm going to suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, 2 broad areas where we could be doing a far better job, and in fact these 2 areas are so centrally significant in the policy arena that if we could fix these 2 sets of problems, we'd go a long way to fixing all the rest as well. Well, one of these policy measures is sorting out GNP, or our measure for how the economy is doing, better known as gross national product. That's one step we can take. Another step we can take is to get rid of what are known in the trade as perverse subsidies. Now, I'll explain that in a lot more detail in a few moments, and I'll give you quite a few examples. Perverse subsidies. Okay, let's have a look at gross national product first. GNP is a mode adopted by governments to measure the state of the economy, and hence to sort out whether we're doing okay or whether we could be doing better and so on. GNP it reflects the sum total of all economic activities that are traded in the marketplace. Now, there are several bits to the definition there. Let's have it again. GNP reflects the sum total of all economic activities that are traded in the marketplace. So that means that activities that are thoroughly economic in nature but aren't traded in the marketplace, that they don't count. Like, for instance, voluntary work. which plays a highly significant role in the working of our economies, but should be incorporated into our measure of GNP. There are lots of other items like that, which are worth several trillion dollars a year. Several trillion dollars a year. And the GNP does not reflect the other kinds of economic activities that are bad for us, just flat bad. They're like, for instance, embezzlement and fiddling the tax returns and stuff of that sort. If we were to quantify both of those sets of economic activities which relate directly to the heart of the workings of the economy, then we'd find, I think, we'd have a lot more attention given to environment, and in fact a lot more money would be generated just by sorting out GNP and making it reflect a common sense sum total of economic activities. A quick one to give an idea of the scale, the magnitude, the size of some of these factors. The GNP of the United States, distortive and incorrect in many respects, though it is, the GNP of the United States is maybe 12 or 15 trillion dollars, and the global economy is worth about 50 or 55 trillion dollars. But here we are, ladies and gentlemen. I challenge you to ask yourselves, do we really know what we're talking about when we talk about a trillion? We can handle a concept like a million. We're familiar with that, and we know it is quite big, but it's not totally outsized. We can handle a million, and the same with a billion. That's we're really getting high, but all the same, we can manage that. But 1 trillion, my goodness, can we wrap our minds around that? Do we have much of an idea of what 1 trillion really is? Let me run past you a challenge that was devised by one of my students. She said, okay, we know about 1 million and 1 billion, but 1 trillion, that's got us stuck a bit. She make a guesstimate inside your head, she said. Don't work it out with your pocket calculator. Just right off the bat, go for it. Try to work out how long a period of time is made up of 1 trillion seconds. Again, how long a period of time is made up of 1 trillion seconds, and then that'll give us an idea of how big an entity is 1 trillion. And when she put that one to me, she said, "Go on, Prof, have a guesstimate." So I took a big deep breath and said, "Well, I'll be on the safe side. I won't go for a little figure like 20 days or 60 weeks or something like that. I'd be safe, and I'd go for a really big figure." And I said 98 billion. Sorry, 98 weeks being the length of time made up of 1 trillion seconds. Now, who'd like to put their hand up and indicate that they've got a good, close guesstimate? Anybody like to offer an inspiration? Well, I'll tell you. 1 trillion seconds is not 10 years, and it's not 100 years, and it's not 1,000 years. It is, in fact, 32,000 years. So when we talk about a trillion this, a trillion that in the economy, we're talking about some very big numbers indeed. Well, let's here is the GNP, the gross national product, and then down below GPI, which is known in the trade as genuine progress indicator. And there's a big gap between the two. There's a big difference between the two. A gap that's been getting steadily bigger and bigger. It's stabilized or flattened out a good deal in recent times, but there is still a big gap there. You might say, well, what does GPI really stand for? We've talked about GNP. Well, what about GPI? What's that made up of? Consider this. The GPI is made up of the dollar values for relationships, for all kinds of activities which are not traded in the marketplace. That's one area where we can do some policy manipulation and free up a lot of what economists call policy space to engage in activities which will give a far bigger boost, a sufficient boost to save the environment and to save all the other things that Lester Brown so graphically described for us. It's per policy space. How much is it worth? Let's have a look at a related sector, and that is what are called perverse subsidies. Perverse subsidies. What are they? Well, all governments around the world dispense some sizable sums of funds to industrialists and to the fossil fuel sector and to all kinds of economic activities. A lot are boosted by these perverse subsidies that come from governments. There are subsidies for agriculture, which is bad news. Which is bad news in terms of overloading of croplands and pollution of farmlands through excessive use of pesticides and nitrogenous fertilizer. The subsidies for mining, and a specific concrete case in Germany. The German government very heavily subsidizes its mining industries because, it helps to lubricate other parts of the German economy. Can you believe that these subsidies in Germany are so big that it will be economically efficient? You can guess what that means. It will be economically efficient for the government to shut down all the mines completely and for good, and send the miners home on full pay for the rest of their lives, and of course no more subsidies will be paid out. And the subsidies are so big that if the German government did those things, the economy would benefit, would come out ahead. Your immediate reaction might be, well, gee, if all those subsidies did disappear, then things will be very different. And so economically, the subsidies don't make any sense. And environmentally, they are bad news as well, because burning of coal, the principal fossil fuel in question, it's bad news environmentally as well. All those subsidies for German mining are bad news economically and environmentally. And I emphasize that because most subsidies around the world, whether for agriculture or water or forestry or fisheries or whatever, on the whole are a good thing. I don't want to give the impression that I'm against all subsidies. On the contrary, I believe that for a lot of activities we need more subsidies, not less. But these subsidies I'm talking about are so big and so harmful that they really do cause a lot of trouble, both environmentally and economically. The scale, around about $2 trillion a year worldwide. We've just talked about what a big figure is 1 trillion, and here we are talking about $2 trillion that dispensed by governments for these subsidies. If we were to get rid of the subsidies, we would spring loose enormous funds. $2 trillion if we got rid of the whole lot. To $2 trillion, that would enable governments to slash their deficits, to increase their health and education budgets by 50%. We could do all kinds of fine things with the savings, and there'd be enough money left over to throw a week-long party for the country concerned. Could be done. One or two countries have done it, like New Zealand and their sheep industry. But on the whole, it's proving extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get rid of these subsidies. And you might say, well, why on earth is that? If these perverse subsidies are so destructive and it's an absurd use of your taxpayer funds, well, why do we tolerate it? Well, we don't tolerate it. Most citizen taxpayers are unaware of what's being done with their hard-earned money. And in addition, the economic sectors in question are boosted by enormous funds to keep them in being, to stop them from being struck off the legislative book. Can you believe that in the case of subsidies for fossil fuels, for oil, I think the lobbying that goes on is in the order of almost $250 million a year. Enormous financial muscle to keep those destructive, perverse subsidies in place. We should make a move to get rid of them. As I say, it's been proved to be not impossible at all, but it is very darn difficult. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all the talking I'm going to do, but now I want to wind up by showing you one or two quick slides. And I'm doing that at this stage of the game, but because I want you to have just a few vital statistics, like the $2 trillion we've been talking about. I want you to have just a few statistics you can take home and which you will remember when you think about it over breakfast time in a month's time. Well, this one is listing the perverse subsidies. An example of the damage that can be done by these perverse subsidies. This is, well, as you can see, Washington State in the top left-hand corner of the United States. That area has been clear-cut and it won't produce any more trees for a long time to come because the topsoil is being eroded away. It's very destructive environmentally and it's destructive also economically, because the logging companies aren't going to have any resource to play with for a long time to come. And the logging roads were installed by courtesy of taxpayer dollars through the federal government in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you get the message. And the next one, please. Hello? Oh, yes. An example of what positive subsidies can do. This house is, well, you can see by the text, it's in the Colorado Rockies, which is very, very cold. They're only just climbing out of their winter. And the house has a heating bill throughout the long, cold winter. The house has a heating bill of, here we go, $0. Because the house has been so thoroughly insulated, courtesy of subsidies, positive subsidies, and also, oh yes, and you see one or two solar panels up there. If you can imagine, this area is so cold that for over 100 days during the course of winter, the temperature never gets above freezing, and yet it's so well insulated that the owner, Amory Levins, actually makes money out of these cold winters. And the next one, please. Yes, solar energy installation in dear old Japan. And the next one, please. Hello? Thank you. One or two sayings to send us on our way to keep our tails in the air. Have a look in particular at the third one. And the next slide, please. People sometimes ask me, well, what about the role of technology? Won't that save us? And I don't think it will on its own, but there's no doubt, all the same, that technology can get us a long way down the road through its inventions and creative devices. But it does take time for these research breakthroughs to become widely available. But note that the length of time in question has been steadily lengthening, has been steadily shortening in the recent past. And next one, please. And pay particular attention to the last item there. Okay, and the next one, please. That was the last one. Ladies and gentlemen, but people sometimes ask me if I'm hopeful, and I must say that reminds me of the man who defined an optimist and a pessimist, and he said an optimist is a person who proclaims this is the best of all possible worlds, to which the pessimist responds, sure, I'm afraid you're right. The optimist says this is the best of all possible worlds, and the pessimist says, I guess you're right. So think about it. Les spoke at some passing length about population planning. Well, there's a lot of good news on that front, though not nearly enough, and as Les was emphasizing, on the whole, where we know what to do, it's just a case of getting on with it. It also reminds me, I've been to the Vatican Hall of Science on a number of occasions. I'm not a Catholic, but there's no doubt that the Pontifical Academy does do some good work. And so once every 6 months or so I go for a 2-day seminar to the Vatican. And there'll be maybe 20 scientists from around the world assembled there. And we'll say to the cardinals, hey, what's all this stuff about your stance on contraceptives? And the cardinals smile and they say, well, I hope you have a nice day too. But then we scientists will remind the cardinals that the country in the world with the smallest family size, meaning there's a lot of family planning going on, smallest family size is Italy. And a part of Italy with the smallest family size, practicing a lot of family planning, is Rome. And the part of Rome with the smallest family size is, guess where? I must say that, put it this way, and it ties in with what Les was telling you, I think. This is an extraordinary time, and when I wake up in the morning sometimes I feel so thankful that I'm a member of a generation that faces an unprecedented challenge, that is to save the world and to save the earth. Can be done, but we aren't getting on with it. In fact, the problem's getting bigger and bigger. But it can be done, it can be done, it can be done. But there's a long way to go. All the same. So I feel really quite heartened at the thought that I can be a member of a community that is humankind as it is today, when we can save the earth and save the world. And then I think, aren't I fortunate beyond dreams to be alive at a time like this and able to join in a great global community, great collaborative endeavour right around the world to save the earth and the world. This is the finest time I could possibly choose to be alive. These are not dark days, for goodness sake. These are great days when we face a challenge like that. We are the only generation so far that has faced a challenge like that. No other generation in the past has had a chance like we have to perform miracles, because the problems just weren't there. And generations in the future won't enjoy our chance to have a go at saving the world, because if we don't fix up these problems now, quickly, there'll be nothing left for future generations to do except to sweep up the pieces off the floor that we pass on to them. I feel that this is a terrific time to be alive, and I'm very glad I've had a chance to come and share some of these thoughts with you fine folks from Japan. I look forward to returning someday soon and saying hello to you again. Thank you.